Okay, here's the one thing you don't do in Canada. You don't call Christy Freeland a Nazi. Because if you call Christy Freeland a Nazi, she'll make sure that you're called a Nazi. Definitely don't do that. Okay, so what's happened is that Christy Freeland has stood in solidarity with a group of Ukrainians in relation to the invasion by Russia that the West caused. And they know that they caused it. And there's a photograph taken of her, and she's standing behind a banner. It's like posing for a photograph. This is deliberate. She knew what she was doing. Everything I'm going to say here, she knew. For sure she knew this. Just thought she'd get away with it. Because they've paid off so much of the media. They can get away with anything. So what she's done is she stood behind a red and black banner, and that's really important because red and black represents blood and soil. And blood and soil is like a theory of ethnicity and nationality that really focuses on blood. So, which really is genetics, but blood is how people have always thought of it. So, if you're the same blood, then you look similar, right? And so that's what would solidify your identity, your right to live in a certain place, is that you were willing to work and die to build a country, and that your ancestors had, and that probably your descendants would be expected to. Absolutely be expected to. And that's the way most of the world was organized until just recently when we decided to try this multicultural experiment. But the problem for her is that she definitely stood behind a flag that represents. Okay, let's put it this way: the Tiki Torch people. I even forget what that was. You know, the big deal that they made. There was a big fight about. They should have just let those guys done their Tiki Torch things. Jews will not replace us. That was one of the things, and the other one was blood and soil, because they think that their forefathers, white forefathers, built the country, and so therefore they own it. And they want to keep it white, so they should be allowed to do that if they want to. That's what they're fighting about. And Jews intend to replace us with people of every race. That's the whole thing is what that Tiki Torch was about. And that basic kind of sentiment that you have strong borders and that the people inside the borders are of a similar ethnicity, linguistic group, etc., is how people have always organized it. Because like Ukraine now, you've got people in Ukraine that are really Ukrainian distinctly, and then there's Russians. And so you're going to have a conflict inside the borders of Ukraine. So if you have enough ethnicities, then maybe it's going to work because none of them will become predominant. Like I think the Canadian multicultural experiment might work. But the thing is it's definitely not what the Ukrainians are about. Ukrainians would come to Canada and say, what is this? Like, just seriously, what is this? You've got everybody represented here. Every racial group, every ethnicity, every religion, everything is here. So in what sense is this a country? Right? Well, it's a new kind of country, but it's not one that Ukrainians believe in. And so, not most of them. They were invaded, Barbary Coast pirates from what we would now call the Middle East roamed around there taking sex slaves for hundreds of years. So Ukrainians, that would be something that they would recall, right? But just look at it this way. How many Eastern European countries were big on accepting refugees during the refugee crisis? None. Because they want to stay white, and they want to stay with their people, with their religion, with their language. They don't want it. They do not want it. Ukrainians don't want it. And that flag kind of represents that they do not think, largely because of experiences that they've had within Europe, where you had too many nationalities and ethnicities and language groups inside the same border, and then you wind up, they're fighting each other, the countries. split up and you have a new border. The borders of Europe have been redrawn so many times it's not even funny. Like literally hundreds of times in the last couple hundred years. Especially in the last, well, the worst was when the Soviets took over Eastern Europe, and then when they lost it at the end of the Second World War, at the end of the Second World War they occupied. The United States gave Eastern Europe to Russia. The people who won the Second World War were the Russians, if you want to speak in terms of territory. Okay, so the thing is that it's all taking place within a context where Christy Freeland is obviously, the only thing not, there's two or three things, I guess, not Nazi about Christy Freeland. One is that she's not German. So none of us are Nazis, okay? A Nazi is a German fascist with a really racial twist to it, right? Fascist Nazis, as opposed to communists, they're more interested in working with the super rich. But in terms of limiting freedom of expression, corrupting the media, violating all of the basic civil rights of human beings to mingle, to talk, to gather. The COVID thing was definitely an opportunity for them to get us all isolated, not talking to each other. They're fascist in so many ways. They're racist, but in the opposite way. So equality of opportunity means don't give a white guy a chance. I'm sorry. Equality of outcome means that. Equality of opportunity means gives everybody a chance. But they're distinctly anti-white racist. So in that sense, they're similar to Hitler, because Hitler was also a racist, just of a different kind. So anyway, it's going to be interesting to see how that develops. And it'll be fun to see if there's 1 million refugees coming out of Ukraine now. Something you'd think somebody like Christy Freeland especially would have been prepared for, right? She speaks Ukrainian and Russian. Wasn't she like sticking her face out there and saying we need to prepare for refugees probably, like have any kind of plan? But now that Russia has invaded, now they're suddenly I think that they're going for the 40,000 number again. Why can't Canada just do something different? Why can't Canada say, no, we're not going to accept any right now. We're going to help Eastern European countries that need the population to resist Russia, and could maybe use a little windfall even, They're going to accept way more refugees than we are. So just give them the money and hope they spend it reasonably. Give it to the refugees themselves. Bringing them to Canada will cost a lot of money, unless, okay, here's the thing. If it's private sponsorship, then families will be taking them in. And this is not something that Canada is still predominantly a white country. And they're going to be a lot happier to bring people into their houses because Ukrainians are white. Because people mostly are full of shit. They wouldn't accept a refugee if it killed them. And they especially wouldn't accept a refugee from fucking Somalia or something. If there were refugees from England for some reason, and they were black, that would be a lot easier for most people. But a lot of people would have a really tough time. Are you kidding? Accepting a black family to live in their house, it just wouldn't work. That would be very, very difficult. Especially probably for the husband. But it's one of the things that the critical race theory gets. The people are always still a little racist. And the ones who don't say, oh, definitely I'm not even a tiny bit racist, right? They're the most racist of all, for sure. I really appreciate different colors of skin. I do. I like the different shapes and colors of human beings. I really do. I'm probably the least racist person in the world in that sense. But the people from Somalia, they're not great, are they? And they tend to look tall, and they share characteristics because they're from the same place, right? And they'd be dangerous to have in your house, obviously. Not always. Right? I imagine that the thing is that people from really difficult circumstances like that are so much smarter than people who haven't been through those kinds of things. A lot of them would be like that too. They understand more about freedom and democracy because they're coming from places where there isn't any, right? Like Filipinos. Filipinos, man, Canada's lucky to have them because they know what it's like to live under a dictator. They don't want to see any signs of dictatorships here, and they're seeing it, and they don't like it. And if Canada will botch it up, hopefully they'll allow private sponsorships rather than the government saying, we're going to stick you in a hotel for 3 weeks by yourself, isolated. Right, that's what the federal government was mostly doing the first time. Ukraine's only letting the women leave. The women and children are leaving. All the men have to stay there and fight. So this is really serious. Those women might not ever see their husbands again. Those children might never see their fathers again. And those women are tough. And and be very critical of liberals. Liberals, you don't want them here. Ukrainians are not going to put up with your stuff, man. What should be done is they should be they should be supported in Hungary, and Latvia. What are the other countries around there? Probably Hungary will take some. Probably Germany will take a lot, but what you want to do is you want to keep them in Eastern Europe so that they can defend Eastern Europe against the Soviets. You want the population there. You want the money there. You want the economic activity there. Pulling a lot of people out will make it easier for Putin the next time. If Trump was president, this war would not be happening because he would not have pushed NATO up against Russia like that. So he wouldn't have threatened Russia, right? He would not have appeared weak to Putin, who watched what Biden did in Afghanistan. Naturally, Putin wants his territory back, and he's looking for a chance. So he watched Biden screw up like he did in Afghanistan. He thought, okay, here's my chance, and he's right. Trump wouldn't have threatened him, and Trump wouldn't have been afraid of him either. There's this guy who does charisma on command. What you want to be, if you want to be actually safe and actually, like, I would say kind of a man actually too, is don't be threatening and don't be afraid. If Putin has one nightmare, it's Trump. Obviously, really. Putin's afraid of Trump. Trump's afraid of Putin. But Trump would have sat down and hammered it out. He wouldn't have threatened Russia with NATO. He wouldn't have put forward this example of such a weak and corrupt, stupid military response. And he would have been working to make sure that Europe was dependent upon American oil instead of Russian oil, so Russia wouldn't have been in a position to afford this. If Trump was still president, you would not have the crisis in Ukraine. It's plain as day.